The U.S. Department of Education released a grant opportunity to help schools recover from the effects of COVID-19. Earlier today, we had a chance to sit down with ALPENA Public Schools Communication Director Lee Fitzpatrick to find out how COVID impacted APS schools and how the grant could potentially help. We're here with ALPENA Public Schools Communication Director Lee Fitzpatrick, and he's going to tell us a little bit about a grant program that the school is currently applying for.
Yes, so we're in round 3 of our what we call ESSER funding, elementary and secondary school relief. It's federal funding based on trying to mitigate the effects of COVID that it's had on schools over the last couple of years.
Wow, so what are some of the effects that the students in APS schools have been affected? How have they been affected by COVID?
Well, I think students everywhere have suffered learning loss. The time lost in classrooms face-to-face with students, whether it be due to being ill, being quarantined, attendance restrictions that we had last year but not this year, thankfully. There's been a lot of time lost in the classroom, and I think everybody understands for the large majority of students the best way to educate is face-to-face in a classroom.
Absolutely. So this grant is here to kind of rectify some of the things that the students have lost during face-to-face education. How important is it that APS schools receives this grant?
Well, it's very important. The bulk of the responses center around learning loss. It's our largest concern, and when you, at any grade through K-12, when you miss a significant portion of what you should have learned, it leaves a hole, and that hole can last a lifetime. It's important to fill in the gaps the best that we can and leave kids in the best circumstances they can be going forward to be successful. Absolutely.
So do you know who the grant is sponsored by?
This is a federal grant, and so the federal government is providing these, and we'll be sending our most recent application. This is round 3, and so we'll be sending that application soon to apply for funds to support kids in our community.
Now, what's a little different about this specific grant is I understand that you involve the stakeholders, you involve some parents, you kind of quizzed or surveyed everyone to see what they felt was most important that they could use the grant money for. Is that correct?
It is correct. It's an important part of running a public entity is asking the people that you're serving how they can best be served, and so we value the input from our community. We're very happy with the results. I think almost 900 people responded to this, and that's great for a survey response, and they gave some pretty clear direction on what they found to be the most important things, and as an educator and as a parent, I concur with most of the things that they brought forward. I think we're on the same page, and that's great.
Okay, so I have some of the data here right in front of me, guys, and how would you all take this data and spend the money if you're given the grant?
Well, it gives us a clear direction. The biggest feedback that we got is learning loss, like we talked about, and the biggest directions that people provided, there was 3, and they were all directly related. They were directly related to materials, time lost in the classroom, and people to help. And so those are all in the same direction, different approaches to trying to find ways to close those gaps, and we will take that to heart and add that when we write our application and focus on those areas in terms of how to spend the funding.
That's awesome. So do you have any information on when the application, after it goes out and is received, when you guys would get the final word?
Well, with federal funding, there's always a significant gap between the time that it goes out. So I can't say how quickly they'll have it be processed. I think we're probably talking about things that we'll be working on next year as opposed to this year, just because these things take time. We are working on round 2 and round 1 already and have received funding for that, and so we are helping our kids to try and get up to speed in our community. In the end, what our kids learn and how they're educated affects all of our lives in the future, and so it's really important that we do our very best by our children.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay. And we'll see you next time.